Alrighty, so I got that going. I did post the syllabus late last night. It's got a long story. I'll say hi in a minute here. I've got a link to my website. I've got a link to my Discord server. If you like Discord, you're welcome to join there. I'm a big fan of Discord because it's not a message board on Canvas and like a little Q&A forum that is just awful. Like we had little forums online since I was in school many years ago because I'm an old person now, and they really haven't gotten any better. But like Discord is a actually decent chat application and things like that, which is great. So if you want to use it, fantastic. If you don't have to. No worries there. So let's talk about the syllabus for a second. I'm going to try really hard not to read to you because I know you're all adults in a college class, and by this point you should be able to read, I'd like to imagine. So I just want to pull out some of the highlights here. So this is me. I'm Eric Chinesky. Nice to meet you. I've been here at Dearborn since 2016. I started here when they launched the data science major, and they needed to teach 150 and 200 in Python for data science students because they realized it'd be silly to teach data science students C++ when they're going to do everything in Python. And they can go learn C++ later. Python's a much friendlier language to learn. So I apologize, all of you had to start with C++. It is not the language I would pick, but no one cares about my opinion because I'm just a lecturer here. Sure, that's fine. So if you want to email me, please email me directly. If you use the Canvas send message, it goes to my other box, not the priority inbox. So it doesn't show up on my phone as a notification. And then it might just get lost in the file. So actual emails, not the Canvas messaging, please, because it gets filtered out. This is my cell phone. I think I have a phone number here on campus. I've never used it because that just seems like a lot of extra work when I have a phone in my pocket all the time. And no one's been a jerk about it, which is pretty cool. I didn't get signed up for a bunch of weird mailing lists. So thanks to everybody for being an adult about that. If you like texting, feel free to text me. But do let me know what your name is, because there's a bunch of you, and I'm not going to know who you are. So let me know who you are and what class you're from, because I got 3 classes here as well. I can get back to you. I do have a shared office space over in the CIS building. I don't know if you've ever been there because there's no classrooms there. But we've got offices there and a lab there in the CIS building. So at some point you can wander on over that way and check it out. It's apparently on the list to be renovated because it's one of the older buildings on campus. But sure, we can stick some offices there. That's fine. So I'll be there between my classes. I'm here on campus Tuesdays and Thursdays. So after this class, I don't have another class till noon. So I'll wander over that way and hang out there. And then on Thursdays, I've got... between this class and my next class as well. And then on Tuesday evenings, I'm here till a 6 p.m. lab for another class. So 5 to 5:50 or so before I have to wander over to lab. I'll be hanging out there as well. If you don't see me, I probably went to get coffee. I drink a whole lot of coffee. I got 7 kids at home, and I teach a bunch of classes. And I'm usually up very late at night because when it's quiet at my house is when I can get work done. That's after the kids go to bed. Mornings are not my friend. I don't know why they have a 9:30 in the morning class, but you're all here. You must have been excited for a morning class, apparently, because this one filled before the Thursday evening C# class that I usually taught. But sure, Python's fun too. So this should have been a copy-paste from the catalog if I did it right. A link to the program learning goals, depending which program you're in. We've got different goals. We measured those sorts of things. 3 specific objectives. This fun thing means anybody who teaches this course, we measure how well students do on these 3 objectives for our accreditation process. You guys probably don't actually care what we do for that, but we are accredited and we do things for it. I've got a website that I like to use to get us started for Python. There's a guy out at U of M Ann Arbor, the School of Information, who put out this free ebook here, Dr. Chuck. He's a pretty cool guy. So we're going to get started on that for the first chunk of class, and then there's a whole bunch of other things we can use to learn the fun libraries after we've got the basics of Python down and tried a couple fun things with Dr. Chuck. So the main book for the first 2/3 of class will be his ebook here. It's free. You can buy an actual copy off Amazon if you want. You can use the website. There's a couple different options I'll show you, which is kind of fun. Some of them are a little slow. So like the just HTML version here is nice, but it's not interactive at all. You can't write code and run it in the browser. So the Jupyter Notebooks from LibreText is pretty good with that, or the Trinket.io one is pretty good for that. They're a little slower, though, is the downside. So we can launch and take a look real quick. So as you get into some of his chapters, it gives you a chance to let's try this one here. Maybe this one will load here. See if we can, yeah. That one's not runnable. I don't remember. Some of these sections have runnable code. Nope. All right, that one's not working for me here. This one. So you can run Python code right in the browser here with the Trinket version, which is kind of fun. So if you like doing the browser, that's cool. I'm not the biggest fan of coding in a browser. It's nice and quick and easy, and they've got the examples here you can run and change and be like, oh, hey, look, something's wrong here. What's wrong? Let's go find it. So that's kind of nice. I'll do all of my code. I like PyCharm. It's a free download for the community version here. If you like to use another one, go for it. I don't really care what IDE you use for Python, but I'm going to do all my examples in PyCharm. Now, I did add a note here to scroll down because the fine folks at JetBrains, when they gave PyCharm Community away, said, okay, we'll give PyCharm Community away, but we want people to pay for the professional one, which makes sense. That's how they make their money. So here's the download page. Doesn't really look like a whole lot, but if you notice, there's like a little bit of something that's not white down here. If you scroll down, they're like, oh, hey, here's the free one down in this section here. But by the way, you should try professional because you don't need it. We don't need the bells and whistles. They have a very nice product, but the community edition is free for what we need to do, which is great. Nothing we do is likely to ever sell to anybody. Is that fair to say? So using this is fine. We're not going to do it for commercial purposes, and you'll be okay. So this is more than enough that we need here. You'll also need to download Python. I probably should have put the link in for that, but it's python.org. And you go to download, and you get whatever the latest version is here, which is fantastic here. Kind of thought that one was probably a given, but I probably should add a link for it. I'll do that before I forget. Give me a second. I got too many things in here. 125, there we go. I'll add a link for that. Python. Okay. I'll re-upload that in a minute. Okay. And then I am rather particular, like most weird professor types. We're all quirky, right? The one thing that irritates me is when people send me code as attachments. This code does not belong in email. That's a hill I'm going to die on. Code should not go in email. It's not a system designed for code. A system that's designed for code is something like GitHub.com. They're a cloud service provider of the Git source control tool, and they give it away to us for free for open source use, educational use, all sorts of fun things here. So all the code I do, I'll put on GitHub. I'm not going to put in Canvas because also sucks for code. Right? You don't have to download files and open them up and zip things up, and it's just a bunch of nonsense when we have a nice, beautiful tool for it here. So all my examples will go in GitHub. I'll need each of you to make a free account. Please don't pay for anything. If you use your student account, they're going to offer you a bunch of free stuff because a lot of software developers and software companies are like drug dealers. They want to give you the first hit free, and then when you go out and have a bunch of money after you graduate and get a job, then they want you to pay for their stuff. Right, so they want to get you hooked on it as a student. They're like, I love all these cool features. And then you go out to the industry and start paying for their stuff. You don't need any of the free stuff, but you're welcome to play with it if you want. I don't really care, but you don't need to pay for anything. Right, is sort of the idea here. So make an account on GitHub. The GitHub username is public. There's a joke because we like to make fun of all the people out on the West Coast in San Francisco area that they use their GitHub profiles for dating. I don't know why. So pick a good username that's not going to be embarrassing later on in life when you share your GitHub profile with people, right? Don't be Captain Fluffy Pants or whatever. I use my name. I don't care. I'm the only Eric Chinesky in the world that I know of. That makes it pretty easy for me. If you don't want to use your name, you don't have to. Whatever you like here is fine, because when you turn stuff into Canvas, all you're going to do is give me the URL, which says, here's where my code is. So your actual name is attached to Canvas, and it will link to your GitHub username, which is whatever you want it to be. Doesn't really matter what it is here. I'd suggest something professional. But again, go nuts. You can always make a new account later. And there's PyCharm as well. Right. The part everyone seems to care about is how you get your grade, because for some reason we've convinced people that the only thing that matters in school is the letter that you get, and you don't actually have to learn anything, which is a bit of a shame. And I promise higher ed's probably not a scam. But we sell letters, essentially, to people. right? You pay tuition dollars and you get letters back. And then eventually someone might look at your letters or might just look at your piece of paper after you've completed everything and say, great, you probably know a couple things. It's a weird system, but we're doing our best here. But ideally, you're here because you want to learn something, and probably that thing is Python, because you took the Python elective here rather than Java or C# here. But you're all fine classes, good languages. But your grade, or we're going to have 10% of your grade is made up from quizzes. Now, it's not points-based, it's category-based, right? So as many points as there are in quizzes, that all added up is 10% of the final, right? So it's a weighted system. We'll have one exam, just a midterm exam, because they look at me funny if I turn in syllabi without exams on them, because they think we need to have exams. It's going to be open book, open notes, open internet, because I've never had an employer say, you have to do this from memory. That's really stupid, right? No one's going to handicap their developers and say, you have to do it off the top of your head. Don't use a research. It doesn't make any sense. So I don't expect that from you. What we're going to learn is here's a bunch of cool things you can do with Python. Here's a bunch of tools to add to your toolkit. If you don't remember it, that's okay. Go look it up again. But you know this tool exists. You know this technique exists. We can go get some more information and come back to it later. That's the sort of idea here. So I don't have a last year's midterm example to give you because I didn't teach this class last year. But I'll give you some sort of prep when we talk about that, and you'll know what it'll look like here. Generally, everyone does well in the midterm in my classes. It's not meant to be high pressure, high stakes or anything. It's a good check-in. If you did well, great. Things are probably fine. If you do bad on the midterm, that's a real bad sign. That something's definitely wrong here, and it's not going to go well for you in the class. And then we've got individual projects, and we have a final group project. I'm rather fond of group projects. I know sometimes they suck, and I apologize. But it's really lonely to be a developer out and not work with people. If you're the only person doing something and you have no team, you have no backup, you have no one to bounce ideas off of, it's really sad and lonely. So it's much more fun to work with multiple people and work on a team. And some of the best advice I ever got in the industry was make sure I was not the smartest person on the team. Because you've always got someone else you can learn from, which served me very well. It was fantastic. I worked with a lot of really smart people and learned a whole lot from really smart people. And you probably all like learning. I'm going to imagine so, because you're here in higher ed. And software is the fantastic field for that because everything changes all the time. You never get to stop learning, which I think is great and a lot of fun here. Some people get frustrated by it that everything changes all the time, but ideally that's the sort of thing that excites you. You're like, cool, we get to do new fun things, and there's new cool things and new bells and whistles and new toys to play with, and I can do more fun things with software. It's a great industry. And then this sliding scale or percentage to letters should be standard. I copy-pasted it out of the template. Should be fine. All right, and then the tentative schedule. I do say tentative because if it needs to change, I'll change it. But ideally, we stick to it, and we'll see how it goes here. So we've got the first, again, 2/3 or so of class. We're going through Dr. Chuck's book. It did put us out till after the spring break here, but I didn't want to go too fast through some of the stuff here. And again, it's only an intro to Python course. We're not doing anything super crazy and deep level. So here's all things Python, a bunch of things thrown at you here. You've already learned how to program, so we don't need to spend lots of time on what a loop is, right? You're all going to be super bored of that. So we're not going to spend a ton of time on it here. We break things out. So we got our course intro. I'm going to talk about GitHub, show you how to get that all set up here. And we'll get the first 3 chapters out of the way with variables and conditionals. Super quick and easy. That'll be this week. And then we'll get into functions, iterations. That's what he calls loops. I guess that's probably a technical term. He's Dr. Chuck and I'm not Dr. Eric, so I'll take his word for it. And we'll look at strings in Python. Strings are a lot of fun in Python. You can do a lot of cool things with them. We'll spend a whole week on files because dealing with file input and output is a lot of fun. You can do some really cool things with files. We'll spend a week on lists, dictionaries, and tuples. Those are some built-in types in Python for holding collections of data. Sort of like a vector when you think of lists. Dictionaries are key value pairs stored together, and then tuples are immutable lists, essentially. There's the highlights. We'll get into regex and networked programming, so we start to get to some of the more interesting, fun, little quirky things in Python. We can do neat things with it. We'll spend a whole week on Python and web services. It's a fantastic language for doing anything on the web. We can interact with a lot of web APIs, do a lot of fun things. It's really nice and easy for doing that. There used to be an open API for market data, but they closed that down because reasons. But there's an open API you can get for the crypto market. which is not really as interesting because it's a bit of a scam, but we can play with it in code at least and have a little bit of fun using that example here. Then we'll spend a week on Python objects, classes, right? Objects are instances of classes, and unit testing. Unit testing is not really covered as well in his chapter, but I've got a bunch of other things I can show you and tell you about it here. I'm a big fan of unit testing because I believe that any code worth writing is worth testing and making sure that you did it right. Right? If it doesn't matter if it works, if you don't care, if you don't test it, then don't write it. It wasn't worth your time to write. So definitely we should test our code, make sure it does what it's supposed to do. Right? You guys all run your code, right? You write it and you run it. And you're like, okay, if I put this in, this should come out. That's all we're doing, but fancier. And you can do some cool things with it, I'll show you. They'll spend a week on working with Python and databases. This is super fun, really cool, because basically everything that we know in the world, all the information is in a database somewhere. I can pretty confidently say that. Just about everything we know in the world is in a database. So being able to talk to databases, interact with databases, get data out, put data in, do some basic manipulations. We're not a database class. We're not going to spend a lot of time on the fine details of that, but we'll show you how you can put data in, get data out. That's sort of the basics of databases. And then we got spring break. Don't come, you'll be lonely. I think the campus is probably still open. They closed it for the holidays, but they keep the campus open usually for spring break. And the dean sends nice letters out about how everyone should be here working on their research stuff. But as a lecturer, I don't have to research, which is fantastic. I just get paid to teach. It's just much nicer. I don't have to publish a bunch of papers. Anyway, then we come back and we finish up with data visualizations. There's not actually a ton of his chapter we're going to work through. He's got some fun examples, but I want to spend more time looking at some other libraries, a couple other things for visualizing data. That's one of the strengths here with some of the libraries in Python. It's really easy for us to take data and make a pretty picture out of it. And turns out most people don't really like reading spreadsheets. Some people do, and you talk to the accountants and the finance people, and they love their spreadsheets, and they do weird things with Excel. I've seen some crazy code in Excel that accountant-type people have written, and it's nuts and really ugly because they're not software engineers and they don't know how to write pretty-looking code. But you can do fun things in Excel. But we're going to draw pictures with it because most people like their pictures, and then we're going to learn how not to lie with our pictures because not all the pictures, but a lot of the pictures we see, especially if you spend a lot of time in news media, have been manipulated in a way to show and tell a story that they want to tell, right? And you can do all sorts of fun things with drawing pictures and making them show certain things, tell certain stories here. So we'll spend a little time talking about that, hopefully bring some ethics into it. We don't have an entire session on ethics or anything, but especially around data visualization, that's really important to consider our ethics here when we present data. Then we'll do some midterm review and a midterm exam. It's not really midterm, it's like 2/3 term, but sure, that's when we'll spend it here. So we've got probably the Monday we'll do the review, and then, the Tuesday, Thursday. I had Monday, Wednesday last semester. I'm gonna be all mixed up here. And then Thursday we'll have the exam open. I don't like watching people take tests. It's terribly dull here. So my plan is to just open it on 319 and you just turn it in sometime before 324 and we call it good. Right? It's open book, open notes, open internet. It's not open neighbor. This is not a collaborative team process here. This is you're going to do your own work. But again, it's not meant to be hard. Right? You can open it. It won't be timed. You can read the questions. You can close it, sleep on it, come back, have your shower thoughts at 2 a.m, be like, aha, like all programmers do. And you solve your problems at really weird times here. And that's fine. Right? It's just a good check. We've gone through the main contents here, all the basics of Python, and then some of the interesting things in Python. Then we'll spend a couple weeks on libraries. I haven't got this all fleshed out yet. Still working on translating a couple things. There's definitely a couple libraries we're going to hit. I'm trying to find good free resources. There's lots of free resources, but some of them are not so good. Some are fine, and some are really nice. So I'll put together, again, more free stuff, more websites. There's tons of things out there online we can go find, which is awesome. And we'll start our group project sometime around the 24th is the goal, so you've got a month to do it, because it is 40% of your grade. The idea here is if you don't do this, you don't pass the class, right? If your team kicks you out because you weren't contributing, you don't pass the class, right? So you have to be an active contributor here to pass the class. You can't just let your group do all the work, show up for presentations, and be like, oh yeah, I'm great. That won't fly. So there'll be some sort of review process. You'll check in with me, make sure things are going well here. We've got 60 of you. We should be able to get 15 good teams of 4 people. Should be plenty here. And then if someone chooses to drop or just stop showing up, you'll still have 3 people. I don't want to get down to pairs if I can help it, but it should be a lot of fun. And then the last week of class, I've got set aside just to work on the final project. Work with your group. You all should have 9:30 to 10:45 in the morning free, because that's when this class meets here. So if your group tells you, oh, I can't meet, I'm busy, they're lying, right? They knew what time the class was when they signed up for it. So they at least have that time free. We should have a little bit of extra time some of these weeks to meet, at least maybe the last 15 minutes of class or so each week to check in with your group. My goal here with all my classes is that you can get it done before class officially ends, so that on finals week, you can focus on your other finals where you have to memorize and cram a bunch of stuff and keep it all in your head, because some people still think that's a good way to measure if you've learned anything. Again, not everyone cares what my opinion is, and that's okay. But I can run my class the way I want. So if you get it done by the 16th, fantastic. You don't have anything to worry about for finals. Now, the downside is our final exam slot is 8 to 11 in the morning, and 4/22 is my birthday. I was real sad when I saw that on the schedule, that I have to be here at 8 in the morning. But we'll make it work, and I'll bring a lot of coffee. It should be fun. I've got my mug. I didn't get a chance to fill it up this morning because I had a little bit of a later night than usual. It's my own fault for not putting the syllabus together before 3 in the morning, so that's on me. But usually I've got that full and I've got enough to share. And depending on how late the night was, I also have my little mocha pot of espresso, and I'll take a pot of coffee, I'll take my little pot of espresso, and I'll mix the two together, and that is fantastic. And that keeps me going, because my Tuesdays now, I get here at 9:30 in the morning, and I don't leave till 7:45 p.m., and with the traffic, it's like a 12-hour day. So that's okay. It's 2 days a week, though, so it's not bad, right? And they're both not 12-hour days, so could be worse. I spent 12 years on call, 24 hours a day at the industry job before I retired out of industry and moved into teaching full-time. So I'll take a 12-hour day every now and then versus being on call 24 hours a day. It's not a bad trade, I promise. All right, so that's the tentative plan here. My specific academic integrity policy for the class, again, it's a little bit different sometimes than some people here. I love when you talk to each other. It's fantastic. Again, it's really lonely to do things by yourself. So as much as you want to talk to each other in English, I'm perfectly happy with that. If we start sharing Python code, we've gone too far with the collaboration process for the individual projects, right? Talk to each other in English. That's great. So get some pseudocode down. What steps do we think we want to take to solve our problems here? Sure, that's great. Work together. I'm happy with that. But again, don't share the code, right? Working on translating how I've broken down a problem into small steps so a dumb computer can solve it into Python is one of the reasons you're here to practice, right? Let's practice getting ideas into Python code. You've gotten ideas into C++ code already. I'm assuming you're all here now, right? You probably have done C++, unless you transferred in and didn't take C++. You all did. Okay, cool. So you're familiar with that process, right? And you can tell all your friends and family when you get together how busy you are doing functional decomposition. It's my favorite technical term. Hopefully they went over that one, right? Breaking a big problem down into smaller and smaller steps, decomposing things into smaller functions. It's really easy to write a function, but it's really hard to solve a big problem, right? Cool, so we're going to spend a lot of time doing that, so do it in English. Right? Save yourself the hassle, collaborate with your friends. And if you don't know your neighbor, get to know your neighbor. You'll want to know a few of them at least. We've got teams of 4 for the final project. I generally let people self-assign, mostly because it's less work for me. Like, I just open up groups in Canvas and say, put yourself in a group. And then almost everyone does it. And then the couple stragglers are like, good news. Y'all in a group together now. And it usually works out. So ideas are great, code is not. If you both turn in the exact same thing, and I notice, which I'll admit, there's a chance I might not. I'm not perfect here. And I do have the assistance of a really cool grad student who helped grade things. But thanks to negotiations with the graduate employee union, they're not allowed to pretend like they're a grad student and actually know things. They're only allowed to grade things very objectively and not use any subjective measures, because that would mean that they're doing professional work that is covered by a union contract, all sorts of things here, which is great. Right? We should pay grad students, decent wages here. But they're going to pretend they're not a grad student, and essentially they're checking for, if I put X in, do I get Y out? Yes, you get points. No, Eric has to go look at it to give you partial points. So that's sort of how things are going to have to work here. But again, it'll get things through. And we've got some tools. that can essentially take the two and compare them here. There's tools that do it smartly, looking at function by function, and there's tools that do it dumb. They're just do the names match so that if you go through and hit rename on something, it won't pick it up. Again, you don't be dumb, right? I promise the work's not that hard. You're going to go through more work trying to cheat your way through than it would be to actually just do it and learn something, I promise. So just don't. But if you both turn in the exact same thing and I catch it, I'm going to ask you about it. Be like, why'd you turn in the same work? Now, in like the 150 class, there's a decent chance you both have the same thing. Even with all the spaces and curly braces and things like that and variable names, it could happen. With the stuff we're going to do in Python, the chances of two people turning in the exact same code are really, really, really low. I'm not particular about a lot of things, and I don't ask for things in specific orders. I don't say the input will be this thing and then this thing and then this thing. I say ask the user. And however you want to interpret that is great. So it's generally pretty obvious if people turn in the same thing. So just don't, right? If your friend asks you, hey, I just want to see your code to see how you did it. No, they don't. They want to cheat because they're lazy. Tell them to do their own work. And really, that's in your own best interest. If cheaters get through school and they get a degree and they get their piece of paper, and employers go and hire them because they think they got an education at U of M Dearborn and probably know how to do a couple things, and then they suck at their job because they cheated their way through school, that employer is going to think U of M Dearborn does a terrible job educating people, and they're going to stop hiring graduates, and then your degree will be worth a whole lot less. Right? So it's in your interest to make sure cheaters don't get degrees. Right? It just devalues the thing for everybody. So if you don't want to do the work, don't be here. Go drop the class. Right? It's not going to be hard. We're going to do a couple projects. We're going to write some code. It's work. Yeah, you're going to have to put some work in, but that's school, right? I think that's why you're here, probably. So anyway, the dean's office gets notified along with the academic code of conduct committee. They review things. I've had once in all the years that the academic code of conduct committee said, oh, you probably shouldn't have failed them here. And it wasn't that they didn't cheat. It was that I didn't tell them they weren't allowed to cheat. I kid you not. Like, they completely ripped something off from online, and they're like, oh, you didn't tell them they couldn't. Okay, so I've lost once against the committee here, reviewing these decisions here. And I have a fun story because the system is weird and we've got some weird incentives and things, and I get paid to teach. But essentially, 8 students took the final exam in one of my classes, and 7 of them copy-pasted from online and didn't cite their source, which you're all well aware of is plagiarism. Right? If you turn something in that's not yours, that's plagiarism. If you cite your source, like an English paper, you say, hey, here's where I got it from, and you give credit to the originator, that's citing your source. Right? So one of the 8 cited their source, and I was like, oh, I'm dumb. I gave you a question that was easily Googleable. My bad. They passed. The other 7 failed. And because it was the final exam and they'd already registered for the next class in the sequence and you need CIS 200 to take the next class, they couldn't take the next class. And the dean was like, oh, well, that's bad. We don't want them to have to wait a semester. So the dean was like, okay, you could retake 200 at the same time, but they didn't have anyone, all the 200s were full. They didn't have anyone who could teach it. So like, hey, Eric, will you teach this 200 as an independent study for these 7 people? And they paid me to do it. So I got paid extra money to fail a bunch of people. So I get real excited at final exam time, man. When people are turning in, I don't do final exams anymore, but I was really excited to try and catch cheaters because they were going to pay me, right? All right, maybe it's not as funny for you guys on that side. I thought it was really funny. Anyway, in my class, if you cheat, you fail. There's no try again. There's no, you get 0 on the assignment. There's no, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. If you turn in someone else's work and put your name on it, that's plagiarism, that's cheating. It's a violation of our academic integrity policy. You fail the class. Just outright. Right? Just don't do it. It's not hard to cite your source. I'll show you how to cite a source here. But again, imagine it's like an English paper here. You can't just be like, quote, paper, end quote. Look, ChatGPT wrote my paper. I cited my source, but you did no work, right? So my general rule of thumb here, and again, it's not a very exact measure here, but more than 50% has to be your work. You want to cite 49%? Fantastic. Great. I got paid a lot of money to do that. Grabbing other people's work, we had to adapt it. But yeah, here's the core of what I found on Stack Overflow. This is before ChatGPT because I'm an old person, right? Sure. Here's what someone else did, and now I'm going to go and tweak it and modify it and make it custom and make it do what I needed it to do here. So I'm great with you citing your source. It's fantastic. The UMGBT tool is decent. It's not the best at coding. It's no Claude, but it works pretty well. I'm fond of it. And really, we don't need the super complex, crazy stuff that Claude is better at than ChatGPT. Like the sort of things that we want to use AI tools for, the generative language model tools, is do the easy thing that I've already done 5, 10 times, 15, 20, 30 times. I don't need to spend more time doing it. Do the easy stuff for me, and I'll do the more interesting things. Because computers still aren't to the point where they can think. We like to call it artificial intelligence, but there's no intelligence there. Right? It's just been trained to take a certain input and give you a certain output here. And getting to where computers can actually think and do creative things is still a really long ways off here. Lots of open problems. If you're interested in that sort of thing, go get a PhD. Academia is a lot of fun. And sure, you go research it. Have some fun with that. But we want to use it to be more efficient. And we've done this sort of thing all the time here because good software engineers are lazy. We get irritated by wasting time doing something rote and tedious, right? I don't want to have to waste my time doing something easy. I want to let the computer do it for me. So for years and years and years, we came up with tools, and great developers have come up with tools that make it easier to write code, make it faster for us to write code. This is really just the next generation of that. It's going to help us automate the easy, boring, dull stuff so we can do the fun stuff, do the creative things that are hard for us to do. Right? Getting systems to talk to each other and integrating things is hard work. And it's not very easy for AI tools to go and do that, to learn two systems, try and make them talk to each other, do all those sorts of things here. So we're going to learn how Python works here so that we can read Python code, we can write Python code, and when the chatbots give us bad Python code, we can recognize that it's bad Python code because it can't solve everything. Now, it could probably do most of what we're asking you to do, right? I'll be honest. They've gotten better. They can probably do most of it. They could do everything in 150 for sure. They could do everything in 200 last year, right? The first year it came out, they probably couldn't do everything in 200. It can now. But the stuff we're going to do, yeah, maybe not. But again, the goal is you're learning how to read and write Python so that when the machine can't do it, you know how to fix it. If the only thing we ever do is ask the chatbot to write code and we don't actually know what it's doing, at the point where it hits its limit, we're stuck. And we can't be any better. We can't do anything else other than that. And why would someone pay you if you can't do anything more than the computer can? Right? They'll just have the computer do it. They don't need to pay a developer lots of money. Right? So we need to learn that how we use the tool to help us be more efficient. And it is academia, so we're going to cite our sources. It's always a good habit to do, especially in industry, so you know who to blame when it doesn't work. Like, oh, I got that off the internet. I didn't give you bad stuff. Sure, that happens. For late work, I don't take things late without prior written approval. It's just a bad thing to get late work and then it just piles up and more stuff is late. And very rarely do people ever catch up. Like sometimes people are like, oh, I got behind on this, and they're like, I can work on it. I'll get caught up. I'll do 2 weeks next week. And then the next week they're like, oh, well, I got one of the weeks done. Can I have an extension for the next? And they never finish. So don't turn things in late. Right, we've got time. All of the projects except for the first one this week will have 2 weeks on, and project is even a bit of a stretch. It's not even really a project. It's the basic hello world in Python, making sure GitHub works, telling me about yours. It will be really quick for this week. But all the other ones will have 2 weeks on. So next week we'll have our first real project. Essentially, you'll have 2 weeks to work on it. And then every 2 weeks we'll have a project. So we should get about 4 of them in as we go. If you don't count the first one here for every other week, right? So we'll do for 2 weeks, we'll do for 2 weeks, 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks. So we'll end on the 16th or so. It shouldn't be over break. So we'll probably end on the 17th. And then we can start the group project the 24th. We'll have the last month of class to work on that. Should be a lot of fun. I'm pretty sure, I've been doing this for quite a while now. Not super long. I started as an adjunct over at OCC back in 2012. So it's been almost 13 years of teaching. I can't math. It's too early for math now. And the only way to get better at writing code is by writing code. You read all the books that you want, you can watch all the YouTube videos that you want here. You're not going to get better at writing code till you actually go and write code. Right? So you're going to practice a lot. You're going to write a lot of code. And that's what you get the points for, is for writing code. It's some work. Right? Hopefully they've told you before, a college class, you should expect for every hour in class, 2 hours of work outside of class at a minimum. I was reading here. There's actually a federal guideline for credit hours and things like that. And the specific wording is minimum. Not like on average, it's minimum 2 hours. I always thought it was average, but I got down a Google rabbit hole and started looking at some of the government websites because that's what I like to do at 2 a.m. instead of writing a syllabus. I don't know. I got confused because we only meet for an hour 15 and then another hour 15, which is 2.5 hours, but we call it a 3-credit class. I don't know. I don't know how the math works, I guess. It didn't make sense at 2 a.m, and it still doesn't make sense now at 10 a.m, but it's a 3-credit class. So for 3-credit class, it should be 6 hours a week outside of class at a minimum of reading the text, doing your practice problems, working on the homework, doing those sorts of things here. So you put in the work, you'll probably do pretty well. You got this far, you got through 150, you got through 200, you probably can code, probably, and you're going to get better at it as you go, the more you practice here. If you put the time, energy, and effort in, we'll get you across the finish line, right? You might not get an A, but you can get to passing. Reach out to me, ask me if things don't make sense. That's what I'm here to do. Anybody can go watch YouTube videos or grab a book and read it here. Ideally, I'm here to help you learn things. I don't even like to say that I teach. I'm going to give you information, but it's your job to learn it here. I can't make people learn. Really, it's an individual process for learning here. So I'm giving you opportunities and incentives by points and scores and grades because everyone thinks grades are all that important here, which is fine. You need to pass. You don't get kicked out of school and things like that. But you've got to do the learning here, and I'm going to help you with it. If you got questions, let me know. If you are asking a dozen questions every day, I'm going to give you a dozen answers. The next day, I might give you 10 answers. The next day, maybe a little bit less. Like, hey, why don't you go watch the video again? It's all recorded. Go watch it again. But, I'm going to help, right? I'm not going to tell you to go away. If you get stuck on a project, I've been, was almost 20 years in industry before I retired out to teach full time. So I've been doing it for quite a while. I'll ask you to spend a good half hour to at least an hour banging your head against the wall when you get stuck on something, like learning how to figure it out, trying to find things, looking online, trying to find up some solutions here. There's a great t-shirt. It's on my Christmas list, but I haven't gotten it yet here. So, better average bear. See if I can get it here. Yes, Amazon. Thank you, Amazon. It's what I say, I'm a software developer. And what people hear is I can repair your computer, fix your internet, configure your printer, revive your phone, set up your email, hack into any system, all for free. What I really mean is I can Google better than the average bear. I promise you this is like the number one skill software developers have that is at a higher level than the rest of the population. We're good at finding answers to things. That's a skill, right? It's a critical thinking, problem-solving skill. We don't just, I got an error, I give up. That doesn't fly, right? You have to go, okay, well, what does that mean? What's causing the error? Let me try things. If I do something different, do I still get the same error, right? These sorts of critical thinking things is a very important skill. So a good half hour to an hour of banging your head against the wall, trying to figure it out yourself here. A lot of times you'll get it done, which is great here. And if not, reach out to me. Just get in touch, text me, call me, email me, whatever you prefer. Find me on Discord. Ask for help. 95% of the time, I get you unstuck within 5 minutes or less. And it's really quick. We've got a bunch of screen sharing tools. You can screen share in Discord. I can fire up a Zoom meeting, those sorts of things. Please don't email me your code and say it's not working, help. I get the emails a lot, and they drive me crazy. Like, what's not working? What help do you need? And then we have back and forth, and we've wasted a whole bunch of time here. And I don't really like wasting time. I'd rather just help you with it here. So when it comes to coding, you've probably noticed there's generally like 2 buckets of errors that I like to categorize things in. And you might have different buckets. But essentially, the first bucket is, help, my program is doing something that I don't think it should be doing. Right? It's either giving me the wrong number or it's doing something I don't think it should. That's your first bucket. And the second bucket is, it's not doing something I think it should be. Or it's just not doing it. Right? It's either doing something wrong, doing something you don't expect, or it's not doing something you do expect. One of those 2 things will get us at least a little closer to figuring out what's going wrong here. And then there's another really cool tool here. I haven't had enough time playing with it here, but this CS 50 course out of Harvard's school here, they've got this amazing tool they've worked with Microsoft and OpenAI to develop. It's essentially ChatGPT designed to be a tutor. So sort of the starting prompts that they've given it have said, please don't tell me the answer. And you can do it yourself with ChatGPT. If you start with, please don't tell me the answer, pretend you're a tutor, But again, they've had really smart people. They have like a team of people teaching this class here. I'm super jealous, teaching CS 50 as the Intro to Computer Science course. But they put this together here. You should be able to log in for free with your GitHub account. Again, make a free GitHub account. Don't pay for things, please. But it will act more as a tutor to help you. So you can say, hey, I'm getting an error. Here's my code. Here's the error message. And it's going to help walk you through some of the steps to debug it yourself. Again, it's a tool in our toolkit, something we can use to start debugging things. It's not going to be perfect all the time. It's not going to always find all the solutions here. But this is a really good way of using AI tools smartly, right? Because you still want to learn. Right? There's no point in going through school and asking ChatGPT to do everything and then graduating and being stupid, right? ChatGPT will not do the industry jobs. Right? I promise. They can't do everything. Like 85% of professional developers, probably even more now, this was last month when I looked or something, are using AI tools. But we still employ those people to do things, right? AI has not replaced all the developers. It makes us more efficient, automate some of the boring, tedious stuff here, but there's still work for developers to do, for software engineers to do. It's a fantastic field. Lots of fun things going on there. And really interestingly, they had a cool graphic here. What's it? Stack Overflow. Traffic Sense ChatGPT. I think this was the good. Yeah, it was this one. So Stack Overflow used to be one of the most popular places to go with programming questions and issues and troubles, because for some reason, if you go out there and post a problem that you're having, people out of the goodness of their heart would be like, oh, hey, I found a solution for you. Because the industry is just kind of weird like that, and people would recognize that it benefits everyone to have some sort of nice repository of here's a common error that people run into and here's a solution. And they would just give this away. When we give away open source software for free, all sorts of cool things here because people think it's cool and useful and helpful, and it's good for people. But since ChatGPT came out, it trained itself on a lot of the data on Stack Overflow. So it consumed everything that was out there to generate some of those models, and all sorts of overseas underpaid work was done in tuning the model to say, yes, this is a good output, no, this is a bad output, to fine tune your large language model. It's a ton of effort that goes into that we don't appreciate all the time here. It's not all computer generated, right? There's tons of human effort that went into fine tuning the thing to make it good here. And I'm not in the group of people who thinks bots can also train bots. At some point, you just have diminishing returns and it doesn't really work here. That's another cool area of research. Can we make large language models tune other large language models? But lots of open, fun questions out there if you're interested in research. But traffic was down like 50% to Stack Overflow now that ChatGPT came out. But if there's less traffic, there's less people posting on Stack Overflow, less answers being posted on Stack Overflow, there's less new things for the chatbots to train on. Now, if you're the not conspiracy-minded kind of person, but if you're into that sort of thing, Microsoft bought GitHub. They own GitHub, which is the largest repository of open source code in the world. They can train their models on the code in GitHub. And really, it's open source. Anybody can, but they've got like direct access to it and know where it all sits and all these, like it's easy access to it here. So they've got a bit of an advantage training their models on open source code here. It's cool. Right? So there's code out there still, but it'll be interesting to see when less new things come out, what we can train our models on here. So it's an interesting new world. But use the chat CS50 AI tutorbot. This one's fantastic. Use the UMGPT. I would suggest the first thing you ask it is not to give it you answers, unless you're like, hey, here's an error I'm having, help me debug this here. But if you want to start with, hey, I'm working through a problem here, and how would I approach it? How might I go and break this big problem down into smaller steps? Use it. It's helpful too. It'll talk to you in English, that sort of thing. Lots of fun opportunities out there with that. I think that's it then. And again, I'll show you. Oh, well, one other thing here. Chegg.com pissed me off a long time ago here, and I still am bitter about it here. So absolutely no use of Chegg for anything whatsoever. You can't even cite it as a source because they are awful people here. What they offer to professors is you can submit your final exam, and for 48 hours, they will prevent your final exam questions from showing up on their site. If they can do it for 48 hours, they can do it forever. They choose not to. They pissed me off, right? And I'm a cranky person. I'm a cranky old person here. Get off my lawn. So no use of Chegg whatsoever. They're awful. They're getting sued by Pearson, which is also an awful company here because they like to take all of your money for overpriced textbooks. So I hope they both lose. I don't really know how that works. I guess the lawyers win in that situation, but sure. Let them fight it out in court and pay a bunch of legal fees. They both suck. So no use of Chegg.com or similar sites like that. It's actually a violation of school policy to post course material on those sites because it's not your material. I think it's technically mine. I've never tried to go and sell it elsewhere and have U of M sue me, but there's all sorts of fun academic freedom sort of things. If profs come up with material, I think they own it. I don't know. But somebody owns it and it's not you, and you can't go put it on a website for someone else, right? So just don't do it. Stay away from them. Their tutoring service pisses me off because they let you pay to cheat. They're like, oh, we're just going to tutor you, but they're like, give me the question, I'll give you answers. They're paid professional answers or whatever nonsense for that here. I used to say, if you could find an answer online, cite your source. I'm good with it because it's my bad for not giving you a test question that you couldn't Google. And someone who had a paid Chegg service went and posted it at 9, whatever, when they started the exam, and an hour and a half later they had their paid answer, and they copy-pasted that, be like, look, I cited my source, it was online. I was really pissed, but I gave him points for it, because I at that point hadn't realized you could get an answer back in an hour and a half. So now, all use of Chegg is banned, because they're just terrible people. So please, just don't do it. Save yourself the hassle. I think for math classes, it's good because it has the even answers. I think that's probably the only time I would think it's worthwhile if it's got the answers to the even questions in the book here for math classes. Other than that, stay off of it. They're terrible people. They suck. All right, and I'll show you how you can cite sources. So if you're using the AI bots here, what I'd like in your code comment as your citation is the prompt itself. Now, like chatgpt.com, you can give a URL that's shareable. If you've got that, great. They'll link me the whole conversation. That's perfect here. If you don't have that, like the UMGPT tool doesn't have shareable links, I don't think this one does. I actually haven't used it in like a year, and I can't remember now. We could try it in a little while and see. But give me the prompt. What did you ask the chatbot? And then you're citing, this is what it gave me back. Even if you're paraphrasing it, right? This is what I got back, and then I've modified it. We're still citing our source, right? If it's not your original idea, a paraphrase still needs to be cited. Right? You all have done an English class by now, right? We cite our source for paraphrases, not just direct quotations here. And that counts towards that 50% of your own work. Now, if you're tweaking it, I'll give you some, some of it's probably yours here. By tweaking is more than renaming a variable, right? We know renaming a variable doesn't count. Okay, good. If you're not sure, ask me, right? Up until the point in which you turn it in and say, hey, this is done, this is my work, I'll work with you. Right? You could be honest, be like, hey, 75% of this is from ChatGPT, what do I do now? And we'll have that conversation, right? That 75% is too much, right? We can't do that. We've got to go back and rework some things, and maybe I'll suggest a couple things for you to rework that might not have been in there to make sure you can get to 50%, 51% your work, right? Because that's the goal. So again, that's why the CIS AI bot's really handy. It's not going to just give you answers for things here. If you want to automate the boring stuff, that's fine. Writing classes is particularly tedious, writing all your get and set methods and functions. Nobody likes to do it, right? Most of our tools have a button you can click on as they generate. It's not even an AI tool. It just knows how to generate the code for you. It's fantastic. Those sorts of things, please automate away, right? It's not worth your time to write get and set functions, right? I'm not seeing enough recognition in your eyes when I say get and set functions, and I'm a little worried. Did you spend a lot of time writing classes in 200? And our classes had attributes, and we had get methods to go get those values. We had set methods to go set the values. Okay, thank you. A couple of smiles. I know it's 10 in the morning. I'm sorry. I'm probably asking a lot for some eye contact at 10 in the morning. But you're not on your third cup of coffee like I am. So you'll get there. Don't worry. Caffeine is a socially acceptable drug addiction. I got to be honest. That's what it is. Nobody gives me a hard time because I'm addicted to caffeine. My doctor said I probably shouldn't drink 2 pots a day. But, other than my doctor, no one gives me a hard time about it. Everyone else is like, oh, Eric's funny. He likes his coffee. And now everyone laughs at me about my coffee. So, all right. Late work. The other thing should be copy paste. The food pantry. This is still our COVID face mask policy is still in here for some reason off the syllabus template. University-wide policies are all linked in Canvas, which is fantastic. That should be it. Man, that was only 3 pages of me reading to you, and that took a long time. I'm sorry. Did I tell you I got into teaching because I like to talk? Sort of. I like people. I'm not one of the antisocial developer types. Now, I am an introvert. It drains me, and it uses my energy to interact with people, but I still like doing it here. I need to go have my alone time and quiet time and do things myself to recharge myself here. But I like talking to people. I got really lonely as being the only developer writing things and that sort of stuff here, and being the smartest person in the room is not a lot of fun. Some people might think it's a lot of fun to be the smartest person in the room and feel really good about themselves, but it was not fun in my experience. But again, that's my experience. You go and get smart and be the smart person in the room and have at it. All right, so let me show you GitHub here. So you all need to go make an account on github.com for me. Now, I used to use a really nice tool through the GitHub Classrooms, but it broke some of the workflow because they changed something on it, and that happens with code. When things change, sometimes things break, which is a little bit unfortunate. So we're not going to use the Classroom tool. So what I'm going to need you all to do, oh my goodness, there it goes, I can't type my numbers, is make a repository and add access for me. So you're going to make a private repository. So there's public repositories that are open to everyone, and there's private repositories that aren't open to everyone here. So if we go to my account, so github.com, and then it's your username here. So mine is github.com/Eric Chernesky. I'll give you the link. I've got my classes here. I put my code out on GitHub because I think it just is easy, that sort of thing. So we've got some things. So here's another Python one. Let me find 501. Here we go. So this was the Python class 151. It's 150 taught in Python, so they added a 1 to it here. You can go out in the browser and you can see all the files. So Git is a source control tool. Its job is to track source code. Source code is the stuff we write here. There used to be other popular tools for source control here, and then our friend Linus Torvald, the founder of Linux, said those tools suck, I can do better, and he did, as you can imagine. So Git now, not GitHub, but Git itself is the source control tool. GitHub is the cloud service provider that hosts a central location in their cloud for you to sync your projects with. So Git is a distributed source control system. So when you have a copy of a Git repository or a clone of a Git repository, you have everything. You've got the entire history of everything. Other tools let you take subsets and all sorts of other complex things. Go learn about that later in other classes. But you'll have a copy of everything, which is really just a folder. So a Git repository is just a folder that Git is watching to say, hey, what changed? And it will track changes to files over time. So in this particular one, you can see I made 36 commits. A commit is just a snapshot of what the contents of the folder looked like at that point in time. And what Git is good at doing is saying what changed between this snapshot and this snapshot. And it turns out when we write code in plain text, it's really easy to compare, hey, this line changed, this line didn't change, this line changed, a bunch of other stuff didn't change. So you can see what changed at what snapshot, and it will track it at the line level, which makes it really easy to collaborate with people. Now, you don't have to use it to collaborate, but it's a fantastic tool for that here. So this one's mine, so you can see there's a bunch of commits, and anything that's a folder you can click on, and then it opens up and shows you the contents in the browser, which is really nice. And then if you find a file, here's main.py for Python. That's a Python file here. I can click that, and now you can see the contents of it. Text files you can view as text in the browser. Who knew? And now what's fun is any of these line numbers here are clickable, and it will give you that line number in the URL here. Oh, that's fun. You can see all my fun search history. You gotta remember that. So if you have your code in GitHub and you're having a problem with a particular line or you're getting an error at a particular line, you can click on it, or you can click on multiple lines, be like, hey, from here, copy that into an email, send it over to me and say, hey, Eric, I'm getting an error at this line here. I can go to the browser and view your code. I don't need to download an attachment. I don't have to have it go through virus scanners. I can do it from my phone most of the time if I'm busy with other things, and look at it here. And then I can see what's going on. And at this level, most of the time, within 5 minutes or so, without even having to run the code, I can figure out what's going on and tell you what went wrong. It's not always. Sometimes it's harder than that. I got to go download it and run it myself and put it in the debugger and things. But this is fantastic. We don't need to send code around because it's out in the cloud, and we can give links to it. Now, this one's public, so anyone can go get to it. Just for a moment, imagine you did all of your homework in a public repository, and what's going to happen when your neighbor, who's lazy, decides to go look you up and find all your solutions to the homework in the public repository? Your lazy neighbor is going to cheat, right? So I'm sure your neighbors sitting next to you are not lazy, and no one else is going to cheat, but the person who hasn't showed up yet out of the 60 people, because I don't think we're at 60 people yet, might be tempted to cheat here. right? We'll assume you're not lazy because you showed up. Is that fair? I'm not making fun of people who didn't come. A couple people had reasons and are traveling and things. And please don't come if you're sick. I have 7 kids. I have enough germs at home. I don't want your germs. I'll do my best to record things. So don't bring your germs. Right? It's just not nice for anybody. But send me the message. Right? Don't have a public repository for your stuff. So to make a private repository, once you have your account, you can go to repositories and you can say, I want to make a new one here. So the new repository says, okay, cool, we'll make a new folder for you, essentially. New, click, come on. You don't need to do a lot of things here. There's a lot of cool options. GitHub has a lot of cool things they've done on top of Git, and they're really cool. This is why they're the most popular Git cloud service provider. U of M technically hosts a GitLab server somewhere, but it was really obnoxious to use, and it's not as nice as GitHub, and it just made me sad because I spent so much time in the industry using GitHub. Going backwards felt really sad, and GitHub gives it away for free, again, to want to make you use their services and pay for it later in a place when you can pay. So it says, hey, what's the repository name? So I'm going to make mine CIS 298, winter 2028. I don't really care what you call yours here. If you put CIS 298 in the name, that's really handy because then I'll know it's for my class here. But again, it doesn't really matter because when you turn stuff into Canvas, you'll say, hey, for project 0, here's my answer, and it'll just be a URL. I can figure out that it was for my class for project 0 at that point, right? Putting those pieces together is not super hard. But you give it a name here. Now, at this point, when you're making your repository, you're going to check private. I'm going to make this one public because all the code I do in class, I'm going to put out to public GitHub here because I don't care if people see it. And it just makes my life easier. I don't need to give 60 people access to a private repository. That sounds like a nightmare. I don't need to do more work than I need to. You can give it a description if you want. You don't need to. So you'll check private. Make sure you check the README file box. This is really nice and handy. I'll show you what you can do with READMEs. So every time we turn on the project, we're going to add a README file that does a couple things. So again, we'll go through all that. I'll show you it all. It's not super hard. And README files are in Markdown, which means they're super friendly and easy to read and write. And they look really pretty online because Markdown's fantastic. And then we want a git ignore file. Now, one of the things that we want to do with source control tools is we want to track source files. Well, that's all of our Python code. And there's a bunch of other things that our development environments create as well. There's a bunch of files and things that they need to use that we're going to track so that it's easy to open things as projects. The git ignore file says, don't add certain kinds of files to my source control tool. Generally, for a lot of languages, that's any binaries. That's anything you compile, because you don't need the stuff you compiled if you have the source code. You click the compile button and it does it for you. So it keeps stuff out of source control to keep it slimmer and easier for people to make clones of and copies of. And then if you're the kind of language that compiles, which Python isn't, we'll get into that later as well, every time you build, you'll end up with a new exe. And like that's just a new exe, like there's no point in having that, storing that sort of thing. You just go back to the source and build it anyway. So the git ignore file says don't add a bunch of stuff. And they've got a bunch of different ones here. You can find the one for Python if you add in Python, and we'll look at what that looks like in a minute here. And then you can choose a license. For private repositories, it doesn't matter. For public repositories, it's only important if you care. Now, I don't actually care all that much here, but it makes me happy to click the box here. And the MIT open license is easy enough here. I don't really know all the nuances between them here, so this is not a lawyer recommendation telling you how to license your software. It's an easy box for me to check here, and it says anyone can use it as long as they cite the source, best I can tell. Yeah?
Did you mean to name it 2028?
No. This was the 98 here. Thank you. Yeah, it is 2025. Thank you. You get some bonus points for catching my mistakes, but sadly they're not actually worth anything. It's like... they're just satisfaction points. But I will make a lot of mistakes because in school, I had people read PowerPoint to me, and I thought that was horrible. And I promised myself, if I ever got to the other side of the desk here, I would not read PowerPoint to people because that's terribly dull and boring. And I've gone maybe a little too far and crazy in that I don't use PowerPoint. I don't have PowerPoint slides. I don't believe in having slides at all, which also means I go off on weird tangents and rabbit trails and things all the time here. But I'm just going to write code in the IDE and run it and talk about it, and write some code and run it and talk about it here, so you can see how you write code and how I might write code. I like it. I get a lot of good feedback about the style. Not everyone likes it, and I can appreciate that. It's not the style for everybody. I apologize, but I can't be all things for all people here. I'm going to do the thing that I do best, and hopefully it works. So no PowerPoint, just code. It'll all go on GitHub here as well, which is really nice. I'll have all the videos out there as well, which is nice. So again, you want to check private, don't check public. And it'll go and think for a minute. It'll make our repository. Now, the cloud has a copy of it here, but my computer does not. So the other thing we need to do is get the GitHub desktop tool. I forgot that one too. Goodness gracious. Desktop.github.com. We got that link here. GitHub desktop client. Now, you don't have to use this one here. I'm fond of the GitHub desktop client because it's the exact same tool no matter what language I teach, no matter what IDE I'm using, and it's relatively basic. It doesn't have tons of bells and whistles. It's not the most interesting advanced Git tool you'll ever use, but for our level, I really like it. I think it's perfect. Great, it's fine. IDEs, any of them that are worth their salt, know that Git is the most popular source control out there and integrate with it directly. You can set up your IDE to do all these things too, but then I have to teach a bunch of extra features on every different tool that I teach in all my different classes, and again, I'm a little bit lazy. I just want to do one thing here, which makes life easier for me. And it's easier for you too. Like, you can just still use GitHub Desktop no matter if you're developing in Visual Studio or you're developing in PyCharm or you're writing R code or whatever you want to do here, right? We can do all sorts of fun things. So get the GitHub Desktop client. Once that's downloaded and installed, it'll make you log in, and the login now opens the browser back up, and then you log in from the browser, which is super cool technology. I'm quite fond of that sort of linkage here. After that's done, then you this big green code button here, you can say, open with GitHub Desktop. And the browser says, hey, I want to open GitHub. And you say, yeah, that's what I wanted it to happen here. You can check the box here, but for some reason I've never checked the box. And it's been years now, and I feel like if I check the box now, I'm just losing the game. So I don't check the box, and I just say open every time. I don't really like the browser to launch tools on me, I suppose. It says, hey, here's the important step. I'm going to take this repository that's online, and I'm going to put it on your computer. Here's where I want to put it. The default location is going to be a documents folder and a new folder called GitHub, and then the name of the repository. Sorry, that's a little small. This one doesn't zoom well here. Now, if you're on Windows, it will probably want to put it in your OneDrive documents folder. You're more than welcome to have it there, but then Microsoft has 2 copies of your code now because they own OneDrive and they own GitHub. Right? You don't need it in OneDrive if it's in GitHub. It's already in the cloud somewhere. If you don't like to change it here because you just want to keep the default, go for it. Doesn't really matter. Your OneDrive will churn a little bit extra here as you're working through your files. Not the biggest deal in the world. It's probably fast enough here. I moved it out because it irritated me. So mine is not in the OneDrive folder, but now I have 2 documents folders because I have a documents folder and I have a OneDrive documents folder, and that irritates me too. So you just can't win. I got to be cranky all the time, apparently. I've gotten crankier and crankier as I got older. It's the weirdest thing. I miss being young. But it says, hey, I'm going to make this folder that's online, this repository, I'm going to put a copy of it here on your computer. We say, great. As long as you know where this is, I don't care where it is. It can be on your desktop. It can be anywhere you want. Doesn't really matter. We can always go find it later as well. So I'll say clone. Now I've got a folder on my computer. Now, if I don't remember where it was, I've got some options here. Again, there's always 3 ways to do anything in programming, at least 3 ways here. So I can say show in Explorer. I can go to repository, say show in Explorer, or there's a Control-Shift-F if you like your keyboard shortcuts. Some people think they're winning if they never take their hands off their keyboard. Good for you. That's impressive. I like my mouse. I don't know. I'm going to use my mouse. So I say show in Explorer. It opens up my folder, and I can check the path here. In Windows, you just kind of click in this right-hand space. In Mac land, it sucks because Finder's really awkward. You have to like right-click on something and like get info to get the whole path. It's a bunch of nonsense here because Macs are obnoxious. But that's okay. So here's the path, right? Documents, GitHub, CIS 298, winter 2025. I'm going to take that, and I'm going to copy it, just Control-C copy, and now I know where that path is. So when I go to PyCharm here, I've installed PyCharm already on my computer. You'll go and install it, install Python. It won't take you too long. Let's see, I don't need that one. I'm going to close this project. Come on. It's not the fastest tool out there, but it's really handy, really handy. Let me close that one. All right. I'm going to say I want a new project here. Right? And a new Python project, we can call it whatever we want here. We'll just say week 1, hello world, world, there we go. And it says, where do you want to put it? I can just paste in my path here, or you can browse. Again, if you like using your mouse, go ahead and browse if you want here, or paste in because you copied already. So I want to put this project in this folder. If you put something in the Git repository folder, Git can watch it. Right? Git's job is to watch that folder. If you leave it in the default folder, your PyCharms project folder, Git won't know about it because you didn't put it there. And then because we created the repository separate, we don't need to check this box that says create Git repository. If you put a Git repository inside of a Git repository, it confuses Git because now you have Git inception. Right? We can fix it, just don't check the box. It'll make your life a whole lot easier here. And then I am fond of the create welcome script. It will give me a starter Python file. I don't have to go and make my own file to start here. Empty projects and then having to go make a main.cpp file was really annoying, or source.cpp file. Right? Why do you have to click a bunch of things when the computer will do it for you? So here, great. Then you've got a couple options for interpreters. Now, Python is fun, and you can do lots of fun things with Python. We're going to use a lot of libraries eventually with Python, not out of the start here, but eventually we'll get there adding a lot of libraries. So one of the good practices when you're developing in Python is to use what's known as a virtual environment. It's essentially a copy of Python that you can add libraries to that won't affect your main install of Python. Because it's possible if you install a library that essentially competes with another library, you can get Python confused. We don't want to do that. We probably won't end up doing that, but if you click the wrong box, check the wrong thing, and download too many different libraries, you might screw something up. There's a chance. So the good practice is to use a virtual environment, which is just a copy of Python here, to add all the libraries to. So it means it's a little bit slower to get started, a little bit slower because you have to go and add the libraries to that version here, but it's a good safety practice, a good security practice here. So we're going to do that. If you don't want to because your computer's slow, I don't care. It doesn't really matter. You can use a different, you don't have to use the virtual environment here, but you can if you want. So Python generally installs on Windows land to this app data, local programs, Python 3, whatever folder here. It will usually just find it for you because it's pretty smart here. So install Python first and then PyCharm. If not, we can get you up and running. Sometimes you just have to go tell it where Python actually is, and then it remembers. It's a decent tool. So you got the name of the project. Names are important, so we're going to use one Git repository for everything, because otherwise it's a lot of extra work to make a bunch of repositories every time. So every time you have a project, you'll make a new project in PyCharm called like Project 0, or Project 1, or Project 2, or Project 3, or Project 4, right? We always start at 0, right? Because all normal people start counting at 0. You learned that back in 150 with arrays. That's how we learned to count in elementary school, right? 0, 1, 2, 3. Oh, shoot. I don't know. 0. We start with 0. So Project 0. So I'll make my repository, make my project in the repository. And if I put it in the right spot, the GitHub desktop client will say in a second here, once it finishes, PyCharm's still making it here. Come on. All right, while that loads, I'll show you. Here's the git ignore file. It's just a text file. It says anything that matches these don't get added. They get ignored by Git here, right? So there's a bunch of things in here that aren't going to get added. Now, most of it's not all that interesting here as we're working on stuff. But anything that's a virtual environment or environment here is going to get ignored. Right? So when we make a virtual environment, it won't get added. We don't need a copy of Python in source control. Right? We don't need that. We'll have our own copy. Those sort of things here. All right, so now it's done. We get our starter code. You might get this warning about Windows Defender, depending on what antivirus you use here. Having antivirus scan your code slows things down. So if it's your own code, I say fine, yeah, ignore it here. Tell Defender to stop scanning this folder. If it's someone else's code or something you found online, I might hesitate to click that button because I have no guarantee of what that code actually is that I found online is doing here. Or when I clone other people's repositories, I don't check that box. Right? But for your code, you're probably not doing dumb things to your own computer. Right? So it's fine to check that. Now the GitHub desktop client says, hey, there's a bunch of new stuff. So remember, it deals with this idea of commits or snapshots. So the last snapshot looked like this. It had a git ignore file, it had a license file, and it had a readme file. That's all that was in the folder. Now it says, hey, there's a bunch of new stuff. Anything that's new shows up in green. Anything that's deleted shows up in red with a minus. So plus for add, minus in red. So if you're colorblind, it still mostly works here, which is really handy. I worked with a guy who was colorblind, and we didn't realize we were doing some dumb things in the software until he's like, what did you just change? We're like, oh, we changed the coloring to show. We dealt with health records, so like lab values were green if they were good and red if they were bad. And he's like, they all look the same. So yeah, just be careful with your colors. But there's a bunch of stuff here. Anything that's in this .idea folder is PyCharm. Just let it happen. We don't care. Just let it be. It'll change a whole bunch of times and no one cares. What we really care about is your main py file. That's the code file. That's the most important one. If you don't have anything else, it's fine. I can figure it out. Having the other stuff makes it so I can open it in PyCharm without having to do a bunch of extra work. And if I don't have to do a bunch of extra work, I'm happier. Right? So when I'm scoring things, it's better if I'm in a good mood. It's totally objective. I mean, there's no subjectivity at all. And so here's the file. Now, if you want to make a commit, that's a snapshot that says, okay, save this state here. So I can make a commit and say, hey, project created. The small box is required. The big box is optional. I'll recommend that you put something meaningful in the small box. I don't actually care what you put here. When you go and work for someone, they're going to tell you what to put in the small box and the big box, and you just smile and nod and say, okay, sure, I'll put that in the small box, I'll put this in the big box, and everyone's happy. I don't care. Doesn't matter what goes in there. So I've committed. So now my copy of the repository has that snapshot, but the cloud doesn't. Right? So to get it to the cloud, we have a push and pull system. So if you're pushing changes to the cloud, if you have a change that the cloud doesn't, you have to push it. If the cloud has a change that you don't have, you have to pull it. Now, if it's just you working on it, you're pretty much only ever pushing. Right? Works out pretty easy. You just push your changes, push your changes, push your changes. Here, collaboratively, you'll push and pull, and there's other interesting stuff. We'll get to that when we get to the group project here. But now that I've pushed, now it'll be refreshed. It'll be out there on GitHub. I can click the View on GitHub button if I'm feeling lazy here. It'll go and open the repository. I don't have to remember or type it in or anything. And I see my folder. Hello 1, hello world. I see main py. Great. Here it all is here. And now I can go back to my Python code. So as I change it now, because it's in the right spot, Git will track it, and I can go and change it. And we don't need any of this stuff here right now. I'll delete that starter code, and we're just going to say print, and then parentheses. Now, Python, you can use single quotes or double quotes. Most of the time, I use the single quotes if I can remember it. I still sometimes use the double quotes, because I did C# for years and years and years here, but either work. And we'll just say hello world. And now you get a little run button here, which is fun. And because Python is not a compiled language, it's an interpreted language, what's actually happening behind the scenes is it's calling the Python executable and saying, hey, Python, go and read this text file and do the things it told you to do. So Python will interpret your file on the fly and execute it for you. And so whatever Python you have, whatever operating system it's running on, will run that code. Right? Python's multi-platform, which is lots of fun, and it prints out hello world. We see, hooray, that's our hello world example. And I can go back to GitHub, and it says, hey, this file's been changed. It's just a dot in orange here. It says, hey, the red stuff is gone, the green stuff is new. It's tracking it at the line level. Well, I just changed all the lines. It's not super interesting here. And we'll say, hello world. We'll commit and push. If you don't push, you don't have it in the cloud. So if you can view it on github.com, I'll be able to view it on github.com, assuming you've added me. I'll show you how to do that on Thursday. Yeah.
When I'm committing, do I do the whole unversion files or just the main.py?
Everything. You want to add it all. Yep. Yeah.
Do we have to use a contributor on the GitHub?
Yeah. So I know it's 10:44, so we got one more second, I guess. So on the repository, if you go to your settings here, and you go to collaborators, you want to add me as a collaborator. This one's public, it doesn't really matter, but you'll go add, and you'll add me, Eric Chernesky, all one word, no spaces, Eric Chernesky. And then it will send me an email inviting me to join your repository, so I'll have access to it. Because that way you can have a private repository so your nosy neighbor, your lazy neighbor doesn't. Again, we'll talk more about that on Thursday if we need to. No big deal. And then we'll have our first, you go do hello world, make sure you get all your tools installed, and I'll ask you to introduce yourself and a couple other things. But that was fun. Come Thursday, bring your coffee, and we'll have another session. Sounds fun. See you around.